Hi, welcome to today's video series. I'm Bryan Hollinger from the Stark County Educational Service Center, and today I'll be walking you through the centralized reporting system. Part one will focus on navigation, and part two will look at some of the reporting and rostering information that you may need. So let's go ahead and take a look. Many of you are familiar with this screen. So this is the screen or the landing page of the Ohio assessment system. From this screen, we can get to our Restart Readiness assessments, our Ohio State test assessments, our alternate assessments, and also our English language proficiency assessments. So many of you may have used this screen for other purposes, but we can also use it for the Ohio State test, which is where we're going to focus today. All of these tabs at the bottom, from them, you'll be able to access the centralized reporting system because all of these tests utilize the centralized reporting system. But for today's purpose, I'm going to click on the Ohio State test. If I scroll down to the bottom of the page that I land on there, I will see this tile right here, this teacher in the classroom. And we're going to actually click on the one that says teachers and test administrators. So once we do that, we'll be on the uh, this tab right here or this page right here that allows us all the functioning pieces that we would need if we were administrating the test. So we have some tiles here that will help us out before the test. We have our actual information that we're using during the test. And since we're ready to look at results, we're going to focus on this last column here. So this middle tab, this is the old online reporting system. You may be familiar with that and have used it in the past. The one at the top is where we're actually going to focus here. This is the centralized reporting system, and this is what we want to take a look around. Also at the bottom, you'll see your inbox. So you can, many of the reports on the next series that we have, they will send reports to your inbox. You can access that through this tile here. You can also access it inside of the portal as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into the centralized reporting system. Once you click on the centralized reporting system, it's going to ask you to log in with your tied information. So your email address and your password. If this is the first time you've logged in, you may need to request a new one for this school year. However, that password should be good for the entire school year. Um, After entering your email and your login, it will then ask you your role. If you only have one role, many of us, it's going to be the teacher role. You may not be asked to select a role if you only have one role there. So let's go ahead to the next slide here. And at that point, we are into the system. So once we're into the system, what we'll have is we'll have a screen and it'll have many tiles on here. At this point in the year, it's pretty early. Our fall ELA results have just been released. So for you, when you click on this, if you're a third grade ELA teacher, you may only have one tile here, and that tile may say Ohio State Test EL. However, as the year goes on and your students have taken more tests, you'll see more tiles start to populate. Um, with those on this screen, we'll be able to see that each area of the state test, we can see by looking at this first tile what grades have been tested, um, as well as the last date that somebody took one of those tests. And then there's a breakdown of how the students did. Now, currently, as I'm looking at this, the top one right here is math. So we can see that third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, algebra 1, and geometry have all taken this test. And this breakdown is for all of those. Now, if you were to want to just look at one of those, it's possible for you to use the filters button over here and to limit that down. Um, it is also possible that you may only have one subject there because you will only have access to your students. So in the old system as a TE, you might have been able to access other teachers in your building. This system is a little more locked down. You'll only be able to see the results of your students, and then you'll be able to see an overall of the school if you have students who have taken that test. Okay. So with that, as we're looking at this, the performance levels going from left to right, we're going to have our limited, our basic, our proficient, our accelerated. When I made this, it was accelerated. It should actually be accomplished when we look at this year's because we've changed the terminology there. So I believe when you look at the results for this year, you'll see that it'll say accomplished, and then the purple will be advanced. Below that, you'll normally see the percentage that is in each group as well as the actual number of students that tested in that group. In addition to that, um, if you have given a checkpoint, you will see a tile here. However, the performance levels will not populate. And the reason for that is those checkpoints are those smaller level tests, so they do not actually break those down into performance levels. They just give us the number correct out of the total there. For OELPA and OELPS, we actually have a different scale. So we don't use the limited, the basic, the proficient. If you were to click on the little green information arrow, the pop-up screen will show up and you'll see that we have our red is emerging, our yellow is progressing, and our green is proficient. So a little bit different if you're looking at OELPS. As compared to the benchmark, the state test, and then, as I said, the checkpoints will not have any bar there. All right, so if we want to look at some data, what we can do is we can take our tile here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on where it says the title here. You can also click on the magnifying glass. They actually kind of go together. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And when we do, we're looking at math right here. We'll kind of jump in between some of the different subject areas. But what we're seeing here is we're seeing math. And then what we'll see is we'll see all of the math tests. So we've got third grade math, fourth grade math, fifth grade math here. We can see what the test level is there. Obviously, it's also stated in the assessment name, as well as their average score, and it will break it down by the percent in each of those groups. So that was our bar from the last one, but now we can see it for one tested area. So this would just be fifth grade math that we're looking at right here. Okay. Ordinarily, we would see a student count there. We'd also see the date that this last test was taken. So if we want to pick one, we could just go ahead and click on the assessment name, and that will take us into the next level of reporting. So let's go ahead and do that. And once I'm in there, actually, I could have done this before going in here, but I just want to get to an actual test here. As soon as I do, one thing that you'll notice is I'm going to show you up at the top here. There's a category, or there's a little tile, and it's called breakdown, or a button. I'm going to click that, and this is going to allow you to break down your results by some demographic data. So we can see, we can break it down by enrolled grade. You may want to do this if you have a subject where you have students that are taking it at different grade levels. So maybe in Algebra 1 class, you have some 7th graders, you have some 8th graders, you have some 9th graders that are all taking the same test there for a high school Algebra 1 class, you could go ahead and click on this, and it will help you break it down so that you can look at how your seventh graders did compared to your eighth graders, compared to your ninth graders. We're going to take a look at what it looks like if I were to click gender here. So if I click gender and then apply, all right, what I'm going to see is I'm going to see a screen similar to the last one, but it's going to have a breakdown for all. It's going to have a breakdown for my male students, and it's going to have a breakdown for my female students. So you can kind of see how that would work. Excuse me. For all of the different areas there. And so you could do the same, as I said, again, for race, for grade level. There's not very many to choose from there, but it'll just give you a little different look. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the full screen again. So I'll go back, and when you get to this screen, one thing that you'll notice is I can see how the state has done in this problem, and this is just some made up data. So this is the state part. This is from a checkpoint or a benchmark, I believe, test at the beginning of the year. So we can see that from the state level, um, how everyone had done at the point that this was taken. At the district level, there was only one test performed. So we can see right here that our district, our school, and our roster will all be the same. So our roster is your students. If you wanted to take a closer look at that, your students, we could go ahead and click on that and it would expand out and we could see our actual students there. We could also do the same thing by clicking on performance by student. So in the centralized reporting system, one of the things that you'll notice is many of the things that we do in here, there's going to be multiple ways to get to that point. So that's kind of the really nice thing about the system is there may be another way that you can do it and still end up at the same spot. All right, so here we're going to have our percent proficient. So we can see like for compare the state to the district to the school. Off to the side here, then, we're going to have these little tiles that we're able to expand, or these sections that we're able to expand by clicking the plus sign here. So the first two sections that we see right here, those are going to give us our top 5 questions that our students did the best on. And then the yellow one right next to it is the 5 items that our students performed the worst on. So before I do that, one thing that I always like to do is I like to slide this standards key slider over. And the reason that I do that is when I do expand these out, then as I'm looking at the question, right below it, it's going to tell me what standard that is. So as a teacher, I think that could be very helpful. You're not always able to see the exact question, but if you knew the standard or if you had the standard right there that you're dealing with, I think that's helpful as compared to just knowing that it's in functions or knowing that it's in geometry or reading literary text, those sorts of things. It will actually tell you what standard that was in. So we're going to go ahead and click that, and then we'll jump to the next screen where you can see that I've expanded out to see the 5 best and the 5 worst. So what you'll see here, these numbers up at the top, that is the number of question that it was on the test. So we have questions 1, 3, 4, 16, and 19. Those were the ones that we did the best on. And then the ones that my students did the worst on, 42, 44, 45, 47, and 48. Now, because this is a benchmark, you'll see that there's links to these. What those links mean is that you could actually get on and you could view those questions. So, with our recently released fall ELA third grade, those none of those questions have been released. So you will not see any links here as you're looking at that information. Um, Again, we still see the state, the district, the school, and then below that is my students. That would be all the students on my roster. And then if I were to click and expand that below, I will see all of my students listed down. So what we did is we have just a fake student here. So last name, first name, their student ID would be there. And then we can see how they did on each question here. So this again is just the five best and the five worst. If I were to open up the one right next to it, or one of the ones right next to it, this is again math still. So this is our functions tab. So when we open that up, we can see the performance breakdown. So on the old test, we would see pluses and minuses and asterisks. So near proficient, below proficient, above proficient. That's what this is, but they start you out and they give you a graph of that. So you can see the percentage. When you get down to the individual students here, you'll see that it just tells you where that individual student scored. So this one right here was a near proficient. Um, as we talked about on the last page, this right here is where it's telling me what standard this actually came from. So this was from grade 8 functions, and it was the second indicator. So indicator 2, and I can click on that. With that, below that, it tells me how many points that was worth. And then you'll see here, this was a benchmark again. So we have a link up here and we have a link down here. So the link at the top with the 4, what that's going to do is if I click on that, I would be able to see the question, just the question that was asked of the students. If I click down here on the 1, and that was a student's result, um, what will happen is I'll actually be able to see what the student answered for that. So I think this is going to be really important, or really valuable as you're looking at your results for the spring test, where we'll actually have some released questions. I know as I talk to teachers, one of the big questions I get is, man, I'd really like to know like what my students put there. This is actually going to give you the opportunity to do that, especially if it's one of those questions that is a multiple response where maybe they were supposed to click 3 answers and maybe they only clicked 2, or maybe they got 2 of them right and they missed one of them. It'll just be really nice to see what was going on there. As I said on the last tab, the fall ELA test did not release any questions, so we won't have the option to do this yet, but we will. Also, you have the ability to go back and look at past tests. We'll kind of talk about that in the next video. However, this reporting here, where it's broken down by the question and has the link to the questions, that actually is not available on previous tests. So it will be it started with the summer test of 2021, and then going forward we should be able to see a breakdown, the single item breakdown for all of these questions. So that'll be a really nice feature going forward. However, those previous tests that have been taken, we won't have that option. Okay, so once you go ahead and click on the student answer here, you'll get a tab that looks like this. So what will happen is up at the top here, we're going to have a student name. And then we'll have a drop down here. So if you're looking at, this is actually question 4, or would be an example of what question 4 might look like. If you want to go to a new student, you could use this little screen right here to navigate to a new student. So it's just a drop down. If you open it up, select a new student, you're now able to see that student's number 4, or question number 4. With that, then, you're also able to, if you want to stay with this student and you want to move to his next question, you can navigate forward and backwards on the test using these 2 little buttons to the side here. So you can see the next item on his test that we can view is item 10, If we want to go backwards, this would be item 48, and maybe that item is in a different reporting category. So that might be why those don't seem like they're in order. But normally they'll be in order based on their reporting category. All right, we can see that this student would have scored a 1, so we can see the score right here. We can see what item it is off to the side here. So right now we're looking at the item and score. If it was a language arts question that had a rubric, we can click on this and see what the rubric says. All right. Now, down below here, this is where they're going to explain to you what they were looking for as the correct answer. So this will be available on all tests. If it's a multiple choice, they may say this is one, letter A was the answer, that sort of thing. Then you'll be able to see the question. I blocked it out right here, but this would be an example of what it would look like. The actual question that the student saw would be here. And then because we're looking at the student response on this one, we would be able to see this is an example of a multiple choice. So we could actually see that the student bubbled in letter A as their answer there. If this was just the regular question, we would see the choices. However, we wouldn't see the answer bubbled in. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we want to talk about then is how do you change the reporting period? So with that, um, if you did want to, maybe we're in the spring now and we're looking at the test. What you may want to do is you may want to go back and look at, how a student did in the fall or something like that. To do that, you could click on My Settings here. So this is back on, actually, this is viewable on all pages here at the top. You'll see your inbox, your My Settings, your help, your sign out. If I click on My Settings and I jump down to where it says change the reporting time period, I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what I'll get is I'll get the ability to change the school year. So from right here, I can drop down, and they tried to bring over all that information from the ORS. Um, with that being said, things didn't match up exactly. So we don't have all of the same reporting that we had in the old one. And the reporting that we do doesn't match up with what we have here. So what you will be able to see is you will be able to see the students' reporting level. Um, so you'll be able to see if they're at, near, or above proficient, as well as their score there. So those are some things that you can see. And then go ahead and click save, and you're all set. So this has been part one of a two-part series. So thank you for joining us for that. In part two, what we will take a closer look at is actually creating our reports, exporting that data, and then creating and updating rosters. So that's a very important part in being able to see students. So we hope that that you enjoyed part one here, and that you're able to join us again for part two. Have a wonderful day. And again, thank you for being part of this series.